The story begins with Sarah. Not in a grand castle or a cozy town, but on a dusty, unforgiving ranch. The sun beat down relentlessly, baking the earth and turning the air thick and heavy. Life here was hard, a constant struggle against the elements and the demands of the land. Sarah, barely 17, knew this intimately. She wasn't like the other ranch girls, content with mending fences and tending to the chickens. Sarah dreamed of books, of far-off cities, of a life where her hands weren't calloused and her back didn't ache before noon. She saw pictures in her mind, dresses that weren't faded, and a gentle embrace. But dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford. Her days were filled with grueling chores, and her nights were filled with the gnawing emptiness of unfulfilled desires. The ranch was all she knew, and her father, a stern, unforgiving man, was the only family she had. He had little patience for her dreams, considering them foolish and impractical. "A woman's place is here," he'd bark, his voice rough as gravel. "Work hard, and don't get ideas above your station." For Sarah, the ranch was not a home, but a prison. Sarah's relationship with her father was a landscape of barbed wire and sharp edges. He wasn't a man for gentle words or kind gestures. He saw her as another pair of hands, a body to work until it broke. Affection was a foreign concept, replaced by curt orders and harsh criticisms. He pushed her harder than the ranch hands, always finding fault, always demanding more. "You're lazy," he'd sneer, even when she was bone-tired from sunrise to sunset. "You'll never amount to anything." His words were like stones, chipping away at her spirit. He valued strength above all else. A strong back, a strong will, and a strong silence. Sarah, with her dreams and her quiet rebellions, was a disappointment. He saw her gentleness as weakness, her kindness as foolishness. He wanted a son, a carbon copy of himself, someone to inherit the ranch and carry on his legacy of harshness. But he had Sarah, and she was a constant reminder of his perceived failure. Their interactions were a constant battle, a silent war waged with glares and bitter words. The accident happened quickly, a blur of dust and panicked whinnies. Sarah was tasked with breaking a particularly stubborn mare, a wild thing with eyes that flashed like lightning. Her father, watching from the fence, offered no words of encouragement, only a cold, assessing gaze. The mare bucked, throwing Sarah off balance. She lost her grip, tumbling to the ground with a sickening thud. The impact sent a jolt of pain through her legs, a searing fire that stole her breath. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her, sending her crashing back to the earth. A sharp, agonizing pain ripped through her lower limbs. She looked down and saw the unnatural angle of her left leg, the bone protruding through the skin. Her right leg throbbed with equal intensity. The mare, now calmed, stood over her, its breath hot on her face. Sarah screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed across the desolate landscape. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning her pain into a blinding inferno. She was alone, broken, and terrified. Sarah's father approached, his face a mask of indifference. He didn't rush to her side, didn't offer a word of comfort. He simply stood over her, his eyes cold and calculating. "Useless," he spat, the word like a physical blow. "You're no good to me like this." He saw her not as his daughter, suffering and injured, but as a liability, a burden he could no longer afford to carry. With a callousness that chilled her to the bone, he declared, "I can't keep you here. You'll only be a drain on my resources." He didn't offer to take her to a doctor, didn't offer to help her heal. He simply ordered the ranch hands to load her onto a wagon. They dumped her unceremoniously at the edge of his property, a dusty crossroads miles from anywhere. He threw a meager blanket and a jug of water beside her. "Get," he commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. "And don't come back." Then, without a backward glance, he turned and walked away, leaving her to face her fate alone. Her own father had thrown her out. Lying helpless at the crossroads, Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. The pain in her legs was a constant, throbbing ache, but the pain in her heart was even worse. Betrayed by the one person who should have loved and protected her, she felt utterly alone in the world. The sun beat down, turning the dusty ground into an oven. Her water supply dwindled with each passing hour. She knew that without help, she wouldn't last long. Wild animals roamed these parts, and even if they didn't get to her, dehydration and exposure would. Fear gnawed at her, a cold, creeping dread. She thought of her dreams, of the life she had longed for, and they seemed impossibly distant now, like stars she could never reach. Was this how her story ended? Broken, abandoned, and forgotten at a lonely crossroads? The thought was unbearable. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the dust and sweat. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the hopelessness that threatened to consume her. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Someone, please help me." Caleb was a man of the land, weathered and worn like an old saddle. He lived a solitary life, content with the quiet rhythm of nature. He wasn't known for his words, but for his actions. People whispered about him, calling him the gentle giant because of his imposing size and surprisingly tender heart. He owned a small ranch a few miles from the crossroads, a place he had carved out of the wilderness with his own 2 hands. He kept to himself, tending to his cattle and maintaining his property. He helped neighbors when they were in need, but never asked for anything in return. He liked his own company, and that of his dog, Blue. Caleb had a secret, a pain he carried deep inside. He longed for a family, for children to fill his lonely home with laughter. But fate had dealt him a cruel blow. An illness in his youth had left him unable to have children. This fact kept him from seriously courting any woman, as he felt it was unfair to burden them with his inability to give them children. He accepted his fate, but the longing never truly faded. He was a good man, isolated by circumstance and defined by a quiet strength. It was Blue who found her. Caleb was riding back from town, his thoughts drifting as he often did, when Blue started barking insistently, pulling at the reins. Caleb, trusting his dog's instincts, followed him off the main road. They found Sarah lying beside the crossroads marker, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her eyes were closed, and she looked alarmingly still. Blue nudged her gently with his nose, whimpering softly. Caleb dismounted quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. He knelt beside her, his large hand surprisingly gentle as he checked for a pulse. It was faint, but there. He saw the unnatural angle of her legs, the dried blood caked on her skin, and knew she was in desperate need of help. He carefully scooped her into his arms, wincing at the pain she must be enduring. She was light as a feather, fragile as a bird. He carried her to his horse, securing her as best he could, and started toward his ranch, his mind racing with concern. He didn't know who she was or what had happened to her, but he knew he couldn't leave her to die. He had to help her. Caleb's infertility was a shadow that stretched long across his life. When he was a boy, he'd contracted a fever that nearly killed him. He survived, but the illness had taken its toll, leaving him unable to father children. It was a secret he guarded closely, a source of deep shame and sorrow. He'd watched his friends marry and start families, their homes filled with the joyful chaos of children. He longed for that life, for the warmth and connection of a family of his own. But he knew it was a dream he could never realize. He tried to push the longing aside, to focus on the work that needed to be done. But the emptiness remained, a constant reminder of what he lacked. He convinced himself that he was content with his solitary existence, that he didn't need anyone. But deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. The arrival of Sarah, broken and vulnerable, stirred something within him, a flicker of hope he thought had long been extinguished. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he couldn't turn his back on her. Caleb tended to Sarah with a quiet dedication. He cleaned her wounds with gentle hands, splinted her broken legs as best he could, and kept her fever down with cool cloths. He didn't know much about medicine, but he knew enough to keep her alive. He sat by her bedside day and night, watching over her, ensuring she had water and food, speaking softly to her even when she was unconscious. He read to her from his old books, stories of adventure and romance, his voice a low rumble that seemed to soothe her restless sleep. He cooked simple meals, coaxing her to eat a few bites when she was able. He brushed her hair, his touch surprisingly tender. he treated her with the utmost respect and care, seeing her not as a burden, but as a person in need. He didn't expect anything in return. He simply wanted to ease her suffering and help her heal. As the days passed, a bond formed between them, a silent understanding that transcended words. He saw a spark of resilience in her eyes, a determination to survive that mirrored his own. He found himself drawn to her spirit, her quiet strength. She reminded him that even in the darkest of times, hope could still bloom. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Caleb sat beside Sarah's bed. She was finally awake and alert, her eyes clear and bright. He had been telling her about his ranch, about his cattle, about his simple life. He stopped speaking, a sudden thought taking hold of him. He looked at Sarah, her face still pale but her spirit shining through. He saw her vulnerability, her strength, and her quiet beauty. He knew it was an unconventional idea, perhaps even a foolish one, but he couldn't ignore the pull he felt towards her. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know this might sound strange, but would you consider being my wife?" He watched her face, searching for any sign of her reaction. He offered her security, companionship, and a life free from the harshness she had known. He held his breath, waiting for her answer, knowing that his future, his happiness, depended on her words. It was an offer born of compassion, loneliness, and a desperate hope for a connection he thought he'd never find. Sarah was stunned. Caleb's proposal hung in the air, unexpected and overwhelming. She looked at him, his kind eyes filled with sincerity, and felt a mix of emotion swirling within her. Gratitude, confusion, and a hesitant flicker of hope. Marriage? To Caleb? It was a far cry from the dreams she once held, the grand romances she had read about in her books. But those dreams seemed distant now, replaced by the stark reality of her situation. She was broken, abandoned, and alone. Caleb was offering her a lifeline, a chance at a secure future. But could she marry a man she barely knew? A man who, despite his kindness, was still a stranger? Was it fair to him? She was damaged goods, a burden. What could she possibly offer him in return? She needed time to think, to weigh her options. "Caleb," she said softly, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. This is all so sudden. I need time to consider this. It's not a small decision." She watched him carefully, hoping he wouldn't be offended by her hesitation. The offer was generous, far more than she deserved, but she had to be certain it was the right choice for both of them. Caleb nodded understandingly. "Of course, Sarah. Take all the time you need." He paused, then added softly, "There's something I should tell you, something important that might influence your decision." He hesitated, his gaze dropping to his hands. I can't have children," he confessed, the words heavy with pain. "A sickness I had when I was younger, it left me unable." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and apprehension. "I understand if this changes things for you. If you want children someday, I wouldn't want to stand in the way of that." He braced himself for her reaction, prepared for disappointment or even disgust. He knew that for many women, having children was a fundamental desire. He didn't want to deceive her, to let her discover this later and feel trapped or resentful. He wanted her to know the truth, so she could make an informed choice, a choice that was right for her. He felt vulnerable, exposed, but he knew he owed her honesty, regardless of the cost. This truth was a part of him, and he couldn't offer her anything less than the whole truth. Sarah looked at Caleb, her heart filled with compassion. She saw the pain in his eyes, the years of longing and disappointment etched on his face. She realized that his confession wasn't just a disclosure, it was an act of immense vulnerability, a sharing of his deepest sorrow. Children, she hadn't given it much thought. Her life had been so consumed by survival, by the demands of the ranch, that motherhood had seemed like a distant, unattainable dream. But now, looking at Caleb, she realized that family wasn't just about bloodlines or procreation. It was about love, companionship, and shared lives. Caleb, she said softly, reaching out to take his hand. Thank you for telling me. It doesn't change anything. She paused, searching for the right words. What I want, what I need, is someone who is kind, someone who is good, someone who will care for me. You have already shown me that you are all of those things. She squeezed his hand gently. I will marry you, Caleb. She found herself smiling, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. His offer was about more than children, it was about a future, a partnership, a chance at a life filled with love and mutual respect. Their wedding was a simple affair, a testament to their uncomplicated love. It wasn't held in a grand church or a fancy ballroom, but in the small living room of Caleb's ranch house. A few of Caleb's closest friends and neighbors gathered to witness their vows. Sarah wore a borrowed dress, a simple cotton gown that had belonged to Caleb's mother. It was a bit too big, but she didn't mind. It felt like a connection to the past, a symbol of the new life she was beginning. Caleb wore his best suit, a slightly worn but well-cared-for garment that he usually reserved for special occasions. The ceremony was short and sweet, officiated by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through. They exchanged simple vows, promises of love, loyalty, and support. As they spoke, their voices trembled with emotion. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb gently lifted Sarah's veil and kissed her, a tender kiss that sealed their commitment. There was no elaborate reception, just a small gathering with simple food and heartfelt toasts. But for Sarah and Caleb, it was perfect. They were surrounded by love and acceptance, starting their new life together with hope and gratitude. They were finally home. Life on Caleb's ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah, her legs slowly healing, learned to navigate her new world. She helped Caleb with the chores, tending to the chickens, milking the cows, and planting vegetables in the garden. She discovered a love for the land, a connection to the earth that she had never felt before. Caleb was patient and supportive, always encouraging her to do what she could, never pushing her too hard. He taught her how to ride a horse again, carefully guiding her as she regained her confidence. He showed her the beauty of the sunsets, the majesty of the stars, and the simple joy of a shared meal. Their evenings were spent reading by the fire, sharing stories, and simply enjoying each other's company. They talked about their pasts, their dreams, and their hopes for the future. Sarah learned about Caleb's childhood, about the illness that had changed his life, about the longing for a family that he had carried for so long. Caleb learned about Sarah's harsh upbringing, about her father's cruelty, and about her dreams of a different life. They built a life based on mutual respect, understanding, and unwavering love. They found solace in each other's arms, a safe haven from the storms of the world. They were content, happy, and finally, truly home. The knock on the door was unexpected, a jarring intrusion into their peaceful existence. Caleb answered it, his face hardening as he recognized the man standing on the porch. It was Sarah's father. He stood there, his eyes narrowed, his face etched with disapproval. He hadn't come to apologize, hadn't come to offer forgiveness. He had come to exploit. I heard you got married, he sneered, his gaze sweeping over Caleb. To this cripple. He had learned of Sarah's marriage and assumed she had manipulated the kind cowboy for her own benefit. He needed her back on his ranch, now more than ever, because he had lost many of his ranch hands. I need you back at the ranch, Sarah, he barked, ignoring Caleb. I need your help. You owe me. He assumed that he could just order her around as if nothing had happened. He couldn't have been more wrong. This time, however, there was someone standing between him and Sarah. Someone who would stand up to him, no matter the cost. A confrontation was brewing. Caleb stepped forward, his large frame filling the doorway. His voice, though quiet, held a steely resolve. She doesn't owe you anything, he said, his gaze unwavering. Sarah is my wife now, and she stays here, with me. Sarah's father scoffed. You think you can protect her? You're weak, a barren old man. He pushed past Caleb, stepping into the house. Sarah, get your things. We're leaving now. Caleb stood his ground, blocking her father's path. You're not welcome here. Get off my property. He didn't raise his voice, but his eyes flashed with a fierce protectiveness. He would not let this man hurt Sarah again. Sarah, watching from the doorway, felt a surge of emotion. She had never seen Caleb like this, so strong, so resolute. He was defending her, standing up for her in a way that no one ever had before. She knew that this confrontation could turn ugly, but she also knew that Caleb would not back down. He was ready to fight for her, for their life together. For the first time, she felt truly safe. The tables had turned, and it was her father who was the outsider now. Sarah found her voice, stepping forward to stand beside Caleb. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, her voice firm and clear. "This is my home now, and Caleb is my husband." Her father's face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful wretch! I took you in, raised you. And this is how you repay me." "You didn't take me in, you used me," Sarah retorted, her eyes blazing with anger. "You treated me like a slave, not a daughter. I don't owe you anything." Caleb gently placed his hand on her shoulder, offering her silent support. He saw the anger and pain in her eyes, the years of pent-up resentment finally spilling over. He knew this was her battle to fight, and he would stand by her, no matter what. Sarah's father, realizing he had lost, spat on the floor. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "You'll both regret this." He turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved pain. But it was also filled with a newfound sense of freedom, a sense that Sarah had finally broken free from her past. She was finally healing. Time passed, and Sarah continued to heal. Her legs grew stronger with each passing day, and her heart mended with each act of kindness from Caleb. She blossomed under his gentle care, her spirit growing stronger and more confident. She learned to read and write, devouring books with a hunger she had never been allowed to satisfy before. She started painting, capturing the beauty of the ranch on canvas, expressing the emotions she had kept hidden for so long. She discovered talents she never knew she possessed, passions that ignited her soul. Caleb watched her, his heart swelling with pride. He saw her transforming into the woman she was always meant to be, a woman of strength, intelligence, and unwavering spirit. He knew that he had been given a gift, a second chance at happiness, and he was determined to cherish it. They found joy in the simple things, in the shared laughter, the quiet moments of connection, and the unwavering support they offered each other. They had built a life together, a life filled with love, respect, and a deep sense of belonging. Sarah was healed, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. She was finally whole. One morning, Sarah woke up feeling unwell. A persistent nausea and an unusual fatigue plagued her. She initially dismissed it as a passing bug, but as the days turned into weeks, the symptoms persisted. She confided in a local woman, a midwife known for her wisdom and knowledge of herbal remedies. The midwife examined Sarah, her eyes twinkling with a knowing smile. "Well, my dear," she announced, "it seems you're expecting." Sarah was stunned. Pregnant? It seemed impossible. Caleb was infertile. How could this be happening? A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her, disbelief, joy, and a touch of fear. She rushed home, eager to share the news with Caleb. She found him in the barn, tending to the horses. "Caleb," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I have something to tell you." She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "We're going to have a baby." The surprise on his face was quickly replaced by something new. The news was so unexpected, a complete miracle. He couldn't believe he was going to be a father, and they were going to have a family. He embraced her, joy and relief flooding his soul. A miracle happened. 9 months later, under a sky full of stars, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Hope. She was a symbol of their love, a testament to their resilience, and a living miracle. Caleb held Hope in his arms, his heart overflowing with a love he never thought possible. He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with gratitude. They had found love and family in the most unexpected of places, proving that anything is possible with compassion, kindness, and unwavering hope. Sarah's father never returned. But Sarah no longer needed his approval or his love. She had found her own family, a family built on love, respect, and mutual support. She had learned that true strength wasn't about physical power or harshness, but about kindness, resilience, and the courage to follow your heart. Their story became a legend in the small town, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, love can bloom, miracles can happen, and second chances are always possible. They lived a long and happy life, surrounded by love, laughter, and the unwavering bond that had brought them together. Their little hope flourished in the light of their love. A heartwarming story came to an end.